A car can mechanically run without a catalytic converter, but doing so causes diagnostic faults, legal violations, higher emissions, possible engine management problems, and other consequences. Even with the catalytic converter removed or physically missing, the engine still has a path for exhaust to leave the combustion chambers, because the converter is a chemical emissions device located downstream of the engine. Air-fuel mixing, ignition, and compression occur before the exhaust ever reaches the catalytic converter, so the basic combustion process still works. The exhaust system continues to flow from the exhaust manifold through the sensors and piping, and then out the tailpipe, which is why the engine can continue to run. Although extreme changes in exhaust back pressure or poorly installed piping can affect systems on some engines, especially those with particular cam overlap characteristics, the absence of a catalytic converter usually does not, by itself, prevent the engine from operating. However, there are important mechanical and performance effects. Modern vehicles use at least one upstream oxygen sensor that measures exhaust gases before the converter to maintain the air-fuel mixture, and at least one downstream oxygen sensor behind the converter that monitors catalyst efficiency. When a catalytic converter is removed, the downstream sensor usually sees exhaust gas that has not been chemically altered or smoothed by the converter. Its voltage changes rapidly like the upstream sensor, signaling the ECU that the converter is ineffective or missing. This typically triggers the check engine light and creates diagnostic trouble codes such as P0420 or P0430. These codes often persist until the system detects acceptable catalyst behavior again. If the converter is gone, the ECU's catalyst monitor never passes, so emissions readiness tests fail as well. Back pressure also changes. Because a catalytic converter adds restriction, removing it usually reduces back pressure in the exhaust. Some drivers assume this creates a major horsepower gain, but the realistic difference on most modern street vehicles is small. A few engines may see a minor increase in high RPM power, but many drivers notice little or nothing. In some cases, torque delivery can shift or drivability may feel slightly different because exhaust resonance and scavenging change. Fuel economy may remain about the same or get slightly worse. If fault codes cause the ECU to revert to open loop or enrichment strategies, MPG can drop. Attempts to defeat or bypass downstream oxygen sensors often cause poor fueling behavior that further hurts efficiency. Overall, although the car can run, there is little practical performance benefit for everyday drivers and even some downsides for enthusiasts. In terms of legality, removing a catalytic converter creates serious issues. In the United States, federal law under the Clean Air Act prohibits tampering with or removing emissions control equipment, including catalytic converters. Straight pipe replacements or non-approved devices are not legal for road use. States add their own penalties through inspection programs, fines, or registration consequences. Some states, especially California, have strict enforcement. Meanwhile, catalytic converter theft has led to federal and state prosecutions, and organized theft rings have been targeted in recent enforcement actions. In Canada, federal and provincial rules treat catalytic converters as required emissions devices, so removing them violates emissions laws and often causes a vehicle to fail inspection or roadworthy requirements. In the European Union, removing a catalytic converter typically makes the vehicle non-compliant with its type approval, and local laws can impose penalties for driving a car that exceeds allowable emissions. In the UK, it is an offence under vehicle construction and use regulations to operate a car on public roads without required emissions equipment, and such a vehicle will fail its MOT. Australia's federal and state rules also prohibit altering emissions equipment so that emissions exceed approved standards, and a vehicle without a converter can fail roadworthy or registration checks. In regions not listed here, laws vary, but most modern regulatory frameworks prohibit removal of required emissions equipment. Environmental and health impacts are also significant. Catalytic converters chemically convert carbon monoxide, unburned hydrocarbons, and nitrogen oxides into less harmful gases like carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and water vapor. Without a converter, these pollutants exit the tailpipe at much higher levels. Excess hydrocarbons and nitrogen oxides contribute to smog and ground-level ozone. These are linked to general public health risks. Driving without a catalytic converter creates direct risks for the vehicle owner. The car is more likely to fail emissions inspections, MOTs, or registration renewals. Fines for tampering can be costly. Insurance companies may question coverage if a crash or claim involves a vehicle with illegal modifications. Removal often reduces a car's resale value, since buyers and dealerships avoid vehicles that cannot pass emissions testing. Emissions-related warranties can be voided, and trying to sell, trade, or register a non-compliant vehicle can be difficult. Several common misconceptions circulate among drivers and car enthusiasts. One myth is that removing a converter makes a car dramatically faster, but most modern engines see little to no real power gain and may drive worse. Another myth is that deleting the downstream oxygen sensor fixes everything. In reality, this usually triggers codes, affects fueling, remains illegal, and fails emissions readiness. Some people believe they will not get caught, but many jurisdictions use OBD scanning, visual inspections, roadside checks, and insurance or registration enforcement. Others think converters are useless on modern engines, but emissions control today relies on converters and sensors working together, and pollution rises sharply when the converter is removed. If a catalytic converter is stolen, continuing to drive the car can be unsafe, both mechanically and medically. The open exhaust path may expose occupants to fumes while the vehicle runs, and hot exhaust gases can damage nearby components. The first step should be to report the theft to the police and obtain a report. Contact the insurance company as soon as possible, as comprehensive insurance often covers converter theft after the deductible. It's best to tow the vehicle to a reputable repair shop, where an approved OEM or legal aftermarket converter can be installed. Using a low-cost, non-compliant replacement can cause more problems and may still be illegal. Theft prevention measures such as converter shields, engraving the VIN, good lighting, and alarms may help future protection. In summary, although a car generally will run if the catalytic converter is missing, removing it is illegal in most places, triggers check engine lights and fault codes, raises pollution significantly, can affect drivability and fuel economy, risks insurance and resale issues, and exposes the driver to fines and inspection failures. For everyday driving, there is no valid reason to remove it. The small theoretical gains are outweighed by the mechanical, legal, environmental, and financial consequences.